Throughout Eastern State's history, numerous faith leaders acted as chaplains for the incarcerated population. While each chaplain supported their congregation in and outside of Eastern State, few had the impact of Reverend Paul Washington. His ministry spanned 2 continents and several decades, culminating in a legacy that is still felt throughout Philadelphia today. Paul Washington was born in Charleston, South Carolina in May of 1921. In his autobiography, Washington details how he was raised to be a minister from birth, writing,
"When I was born, my course had already been carefully set for me by my mother. As I grew into awareness, I learned that I was to be a minister. I was expected to join the church and to be working at a part-time job by the age of 10. Then, when I grew up, I was to go to college. My mother named me Paul because she so admired the courage and eloquence of the Apostle Paul. She had dedicated me to God's service." Washington attended Memorial Baptist Church in Charleston during his childhood. He later recalled that while he valued his upbringing, he couldn't envision himself as a fiery preacher like the evangelist that inspired him. It wasn't until later that he embraced the Episcopal Church.
At 17, Washington moved to Pennsylvania to attend Lincoln College. There, Reverend Matthew Davis, the Episcopal chaplain, convinced Washington to join the Episcopal Church. Reflecting on this decision, Washington wrote,
"I had only known Baptist and Methodist ministers. They were what we called black preachers, and I knew that I did not have that type of personality." Reverend Davis appealed to Washington's sensibilities and fast-tracked his ordination. Soon after, Washington began studying at the Philadelphia Divinity School, where he was alienated. Washington, the first black person to live in the Philadelphia Divinity School seminary dorm, often faced racist discrimination, like being barred from trainings that only allowed white students.
After 6 years in Liberia, Washington, along with his wife and children, moved back to Philadelphia, settling in Eastwick, an integrated yet underdeveloped neighborhood in the southwest section of the city. There, Paul Washington served as vicar of St. Cyprian's Church for over 8 years. It was during his time in Eastwick that Washington began his work as Episcopal chaplain at Eastern State Penitentiary, a place Washington described as
that large and forbidding structure of concrete and steel in the heart of Philadelphia.
Washington served as the Episcopal chaplain at Eastern State until its closing in 1970. During those years, Washington worked with hundreds of incarcerated people. Writing in his autobiography, Washington reflected,
99% of prison ministry is listening, I discovered. In the listening, I found revealed the darkest and brightest images of humanity. In these men, I saw all of mankind. But most important, I saw myself. I discovered that we are all more alike than unalike each other, except that by the grace of God or by accident, circumstances, or luck, at a crossroad, one of us had turned to the right and the other to the left.
Reverend Washington was a regular contributor to the penitentiary's prisoner-run magazine, The Eastern Echo, which was printed quarterly from 1956 to 1967. In a recurring column titled, From Our Chaplains, Washington and other religious leaders at Eastern State reflected on a particular theme or concept, often using metaphors to convey their messages. In the spring 1961 edition, Washington compared people to cars, describing how all parts must be working properly and in sync with one another in order to avoid an accident.
In another article written 2 years later, Washington used a clever anecdote from his time in Africa to promote a way of life that doesn't prioritize money or accumulation. In his story, he sent a worker into town to purchase eggs. Seeing the man return empty-handed, Washington assumed that the vendor was sold out. The worker corrected him, explaining that the vendor did indeed have eggs, but was not interested in selling them since he did not need any money at that time.
In 1962, Washington became rector of the Church of the Advocate in North Philadelphia, a position he held for more than 20 years until his retirement. During this tenure, he championed several human rights struggles, transforming his parish in ways that created a lasting impact on the church itself and the Episcopal faith worldwide. As a leader of the civil rights movement, Washington opened the Church of the Advocate to the Black Power movement several times during the 1960s and 70s. In 1968, the Church of the Advocate hosted the National Conference on Black Power, which was attended by 8,000 people. In 1970, the Church of the Advocate hosted the annual convention of the Black Panther Party, and the organization's founder, Huey Newton, spoke at the event. Named the Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention, the goal of the meeting was to unite the radical left and create a new movement that incorporated women, Native Americans, anti-war protesters, and LGBTQ people.
With permission from his congregation, in 1973, Washington commissioned 2 artists, Walter Edmonds and Richard Watson, to paint 14 murals inside the Church of the Advocate. Painted on waterproof plywood, the murals connect themes in Scripture with the history and experiences of Black people worldwide, including slavery, emancipation, and the Civil Rights Movement. Historical figures depicted in the murals include Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass, H. Rap Brown, Shirley Chisholm, Martin Luther King Jr., and Stokely Carmichael.
Paul Washington also supported women's liberation through the ordination of women as priests within the Episcopal Church, a role that was denied to women until Washington's involvement. On July 29, 1974, for the first time, 11 women were ordained as Episcopal priests during a ceremony at the Church of the Advocate. The ordination was met with extreme pushback from church leadership and was invalidated during an emergency session of Episcopal bishops. This marked a pivotal moment for the Episcopal Church, and ultimately, the leadership reversed this decision and formally allowed women to serve as priests in 1977, 3 years after Washington helped spearhead the initiative.
Washington continued to embrace controversy and defend his beliefs in later years. First, by traveling to Iran during the 1980 hostage crisis to participate in an international peace conference, and later by serving on the MOVE Commission, which concluded that the 1985 bombing of a Philadelphia neighborhood by police and city officials was unconscionable. Reverend Washington had a long and complicated relationship with MOVE that began before the bombing and continued after. In his autobiography, Washington wrote that he would defend MOVE members in their ongoing struggle against police brutality, but recognized that MOVE often initiated these confrontations. He was present when MOVE member and bombing survivor Ramona Africa was released from prison in 1992.
Paul Washington retired from his position as rector at the Church of the Advocate in 1987. During the 1990s, he served as the chaplain of the Advocate Communities Development Corporation Board of Directors. Founded by Christine Washington, the ACDC built and rehabbed hundreds of housing units in North Philadelphia for people in need. Paul Washington died on October 7, 2002.
Reverend Paul Washington's legacy endures as a transformative figure in both the religious and social landscapes of Philadelphia. From his pioneering role as Episcopal chaplain at Eastern State Penitentiary to his leadership at the Church of the Advocate, Washington's commitment to justice, equality, and spiritual guidance left an indelible mark on his community and the broader Episcopal Church.
His work extended far beyond the pulpit as he championed civil rights, Black liberation, and the ordination of women, all while fostering a legacy of compassion and understanding for those on the margins of society. Washington's dedication to listening, to seeing the humanity in others, and to acting in faith has shaped the course of Philadelphia's history, leaving a lasting influence that continues to resonate today. How do you think Reverend Paul Washington's experience as both a faith leader and a civil rights advocate shaped his work at Eastern State Penitentiary?
What lessons can we draw from his approach to prison ministry?